Hey guys, how's it going? So this is going to be somewhat of a different video to the usual thing that I upload here to this channel. So let me kind of give you a bit of an introduction on it. So I live here in Sheffield in the north of England, and it's a great city, and I'm lucky enough that my good friend and colleague Dr. David Clarke also lives in this city. And over the past few years, if you're familiar with this channel, you know David has been a returning guest, and we've struck up quite the friendship, and he really helps me with things, just an all-round great researcher. Now, for years I'd been hearing about a UFO incident here in Sheffield back in 1997, but it was something that I'd never really looked into deeply. Sure, you know, I read the kind of newspaper articles and a lot of the information that's been put out online with some very mixed kind of thoughts on what actually happened back then, 27 years ago. So recently I've been getting the itch to kind of do something a little bit different. So I thought, you know what, I'll speak to David and see what I can learn about the incident that happened here in this city all those years ago. And so David sent me lots of information. I went back online and started looking stuff up. So let me give you a small gist. You know, just outside of the city, we have a vast countryside called the Peak District. Just huge, really remote, beautiful, lush English countryside. And back in 1997, in March, on a night, the Hale-Bopp comet was, you know, in the sky, and so many people out there in the countryside were out looking for the comet. But what they saw, and we got lots of reports to the local police, is reports of low-flying aircraft, strange lights, triangle-shaped objects. Someone reported a cigar-shaped object, sonic booms, loud explosions. All of this, which then prompted a huge search and rescue operation for a potential downed aircraft on the moorland out there in the countryside. So there was no real kind of conclusion to it all, you know, and obviously to me it sparked my interest when you're talking about strange lights, strange shaped objects, your typical kind of UFO reports. And so in this video, myself and Dr. Clarke, we head out into the Peak District. We sit down, David kind of goes through a lot of documents. He was a reporter at the time with the local newspaper, so he was out on location as soon as he heard about it. And so we go through a lot of his work from back in 97, and we go and visit a few of the locations just to get an idea of the area. And so I hope you enjoy this video. It's not my normal thing. I am not a video editor or anything, but I've put this all together myself. So yeah, please check it out. Leave any comments down below, subscribe if you don't already, and give it a big thumbs up. And I really appreciate each and every one of you for the continued support here on this channel. Thank you.
Right, if I can get this map open. Here at the Lady Bower Inn, this is like Peak District National Park. So all this massive area here is probably one of the most remotest, if you can say this in England, one of the most remote parts of England, that no one lives there. All this big stretch of peat moss and moor and, you know, high moorland, gritstone. There's no one that lives within that sort of 20-mile square zone. So you've got Manchester, massive city over here, you've got Sheffield over here, Stocksbridge and the Woodhead Pass over to Manchester, and then West Yorkshire up there. But all this area is just full of reservoirs, man-made dams, and the Lady Bower Dam, which is where famously during the Second World War the 617 Squadron, Dam Buster Squadron, practiced the bouncing bomb on the reservoirs here, preparing to attack the German dams, the Moor dams in the Ruhr Valley. Famous Dam Busters raid. So there's a lot of memorials to that. There's a little museum in the dam just here that you can visit. And every whenever the anniversary of the Dam Busters raid is. For the last 30-40 years, the one surviving Lancaster bomber, which is based at RAF Waddington, comes in and does a flyover, and thousands of people come to see it with all the World War II aircraft, etc. So this is where the incident happened, basically. So most of the people who saw unusual things were over on this side of the moors. So here you've got the outskirts of Sheffield, northwest Sheffield. You've got all these little farms and hamlets and things around the Bradfield, which is what this area is called here. So people who saw unusual things were all in this part of South Yorkshire, and bits of people up in West Yorkshire as well, but mainly around Bradfield and Sheffield. So they all, on this particular night, saw lights in the sky, aircraft, all sort of heading over in this direction, over the what I would call Dark Peak, in the direction of Manchester. So on 24th of March 97. A little gamekeeper's cottage there, and the gamekeeper who lived there at the time, and his wife, they heard this tremendous, what they described as an explosion in the sky about 10 p.m. that night, and went outside, looked around, couldn't see anything. So they didn't actually see anything, they heard something, and they phoned 999, fire and ambulance, thinking an aeroplane had crashed on the moors. And at about the same time, up on the moors near here, which is sort of Bradfield, Broomhead Reservoir, a policewoman called Marie France was out with her husband, and they'd gone out to see the Halley-Bopp comet. They were sky watching. They didn't hear anything, but they saw this, what they described as a very strange looking aircraft that was flying at treetop level with all its I think they said it was like all lit up, like the cabin windows were illuminated, which is like a very odd thing for an aircraft to do at night. But anyway, that was at treetop level, and they watched that go off into the distance, and I think they might then have heard some kind of explosion or a plume of smoke, or saw something like that over this area here. And I think there was also a farmer who living in this area up near Stocksbridge, Bolsterstone, who at the same time saw an aircraft anyway, and then heard an explosion and saw a plume of smoke. So if you can imagine, you're a 999 operator that night, and you've received at least three, there were more than three separate calls from people, somebody reporting a massive explosion, somebody reporting a low-level aircraft, somebody else seeing a plume of smoke, all in this barren area here. What do? You think naturally, air crash, but then what they did is they contacted the RAF, they contacted air traffic control in Manchester, which is the nearest big airport, and the obvious first question was, have you lost any aircraft? And the answer that came back was no, nothing missing. Which straight away, the police then and emergency services, well, what's going on here? Was it a light aircraft? Because there were lots of rumours about drug running going on at the time. Some of the Peak Park wardens said that they'd heard that drug dealers were using light aircraft to sort of drop drugs in isolated areas for people to pick them up, that kind of thing. Was it something to do with that? Nobody knew. So Manchester Airport imposed a 40 square mile exclusion zone right over this area here that you can see, which is basically up to I think 30,000 feet or something, basically to stop any aircraft going into that area until they'd resolved what had happened. And then straight away all these mountain rescue teams, fire services, both from Derbyshire, South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire and Greater Manchester, all converged on Strines Inn in the car park. So you got 200-300 people, volunteer mountain rescue team members who are just ordinary people who are outdoors people, basically, who do a lot of walking, climbing, and they volunteer for the mountain rescue team. So if anyone gets into trouble or distress or breaks a leg, or there are fatalities quite often, they're the people who get called out from the day job, pile into like a converted ambulance, and they go out and they rescue people from the moors. So there was a whole bunch, think about 5 separate mountain rescue teams, all from this area, all converged on Strines Inn. Fire engines from Sheffield and South Yorkshire, fire engines from Derbyshire, police, and I think at some stage they got the RAF SE rescue helicopter from RAF Leckensfield, which was over on the east coast. That flew over. So massive amount of activity, and this went on for most of the following day. And I was on calls duty, Sheffield Star, that morning, so I was getting all these calls. So I got out there as soon as I could as well, and couldn't get anywhere near because it was all blocked off and there were people out all over the moors. But it was, as you can see, quite a big deal at the time.
So what we have here?
So this is South Yorkshire Police log printed from their computer of that night. So you can see it starts there, first call. Although I think that, yeah, it's split into various. Let's have a look, see if I can find the start point of this.
So saw white flashing lights.
Yeah, but you can see from this, you know, it's all quite consistent with aircraft flying very low, basically over people's houses in Sheffield and Stocksbridge, and Ecclesfield.
So this one here, that female caller saw the plane. It was very low and she could not hear any engine sounds. Certainly such a vast amount of witnesses.
Loads, absolutely loads. This is all my...
There we go. Call from a female at Stannington,
Yeah, that's
about
the one.
10 p.m. She looked out towards Bradfield
cigar
from
shaped
her
one.
window and saw a cigar-shaped object, which was very low, going towards High Bradfield. It was lit more than a normal plane would be. Wow. And then so you've got some notes here. So have you spoken to her?
I spoke to her at the time, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And she was adamant that it was a cigar-shaped object.
Yeah, she was, yeah.
Wow.
Then there was a guy on a train between Sheffield and Barn. Oh, a woman. So an airplane heading very low towards Manchester, disappeared over some houses. And somebody else from Stannington, 10 p.m, saw light aircraft, very low. No, that's the one I'm thinking of, yeah. Guy on a train, this is at 7:40, travelling on a train back home in Barnsley, saw a triangle object with lights all around it, hovering, doesn't think it was a plane. Then you've got someone from Balsterstone, which is here.
It's pretty central to it all.
Yeah. Let's say that he saw 9 p.m. last night, saw white lights of an aircraft flying low over the Howden Valley, which is that valley there. Mail caller from Dronfield states that 2 jets, RAF jets, came over low and fast, and then a single engine plane circled twice over Dronfield. And my friend Steve, who works in Chesterfield, that's effectively what he saw at exactly that time.
Right.
He was on a high point and he saw these 2 RAF jets.
Because there have been rumours, haven't there, of 2 jets chasing an object.
Yeah.
You know, there's been a lot of things seemingly added to the story
Yeah.
that makes it even more
Yeah.
bizarre.
But a lot of those people came forward years later,
Right.
saying that they'd seen something, but I'm always sceptical about that, whereas this is a log from the
From the
actual
night,
time,
yeah.
people calling the police. To Clarkson, Mountain Rescue have 2 dogs attending Fiddler's Green on the A628, which is up here. Yeah, searching from Langsett Moor south towards Derwent Reservoir, 3 dogs leaving Slippery Stones, north tip of Howden Reservoir, which is there. Searching to the west towards Ronksley Moor. So all that area, from being completely empty and barren, has suddenly got all these people out with search dogs, helicopters. There was the West Yorkshire Police helicopter and the RAF Air Sea Rescue Chinook helicopter from Leckensfield, both flying over. This is at the early hours of the morning the following day. Nothing found.
So this is the explosion. Is
These
this
are
1 or 2
2.
explosions that were heard?
Yeah, one at just before 10 o'clock and one at just after 10 o'clock.
So seismic alert, sonic event.
Yeah.
RAF search and rescue. So these would have been the sonic booms from the tornadoes that were seen flying over the area, and
Yeah.
these are the readouts. So we've got
From a
actual
microphone that at Leeds. that registers noise. So they're looking for earthquakes.
Right.
That's what they're interested in, BGS. So if there's a big earthquake, they've got sensitive microphones that record it and measure it. So one sort of like outcome from that is that they also pick up stuff in the sky.
Of course.
As in this case, so the first thing they think is this an earthquake? No, it's aerial. and to be frank, this is not unusual.
No.
If you look at their records and just look at newspaper coverage, every now and again the Russians come over, they scramble aircraft, bang, they go through the sound barrier.
Of course.
Yeah. It's not unusual.
Right.
It's just that this was over land, whereas normally they'd be doing it over at North Sea up towards Iceland.
Okay.
So I did a FOI and even got a copy of BGS inquiry, and there's a thing saying inquirer's name, David Clarke, Star newspaper. That was my office number. Mr. C is investigating reports of an explosion, plane between Manchester and Sheffield at 10 p.m. Monday the 24th. Do we have anything? These files were extracted in response to an inquiry. So RAF Kinloss in Scotland got involved. They are the main air sea rescue coordination centre, or were.
Right.
So they checked with them straight away. They had received a report from the public of an aircraft being seen and an explosion at 10 o'clock. No signals were consistent with an impact of an aircraft, but signals on LHO Park, that's Leeds,
Right.
looked to be sonic in origin. Yeah, we received reports from the Sheffield Star newspaper that 4 or 5 people between Manchester and Sheffield had heard an explosion. We told them we had detected a signal consistent with a sonic boom at the given time, and we would confirm that once the Leeds tape had been received. So,
But we had that one witness who said she heard an explosion and saw a big red flashing light, almost like, I guess, what she would assume is
yeah.
a plane in distress or an explosion of a plane. But
It's the coincidence, isn't it, between people seeing planes or objects at low level moving fast and an explosion.
yeah,
Now, putting 2 and 2 together, it's a fast moving military jet that's gone through the sound barrier. It's obvious.
but then obviously you have the cigar-shaped object, you have the triangle sighting, so
Yeah.
you get the UFO thing thrown in.
Yeah. And it seems there was also, and this is the baffling thing, some kind of light aircraft flying around as well as the jets at the same time. You know, like a civilian, like a Cessna or something.
Is there any radars that could have picked that up, do we know?
Yeah, they looked at radar.
Did they see anything on radar?
This is going ahead because a year later I got my MP Ellen Jackson to ask questions in Parliament, and they reluctantly had to take another look at it. So they did actually go back and check the radars from the time,
Right.
which I don't think they came up with much of interest. But yeah, this is it. Interestingly, Provost and Security Services,
Wow.
Rudloe Manor,
Wow.
which is, if you recall, that's what Nick Redfern and Tim Good claimed to have discovered, that this was the secret RAF cell, as they called it. They secretly investigated UFOs,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
they weren't far from the truth.
Wow.
Because clearly they were called in to investigate this as a result of the questions in the House of Commons the following year.
Wow.
So I basically, like with the Calvin thing, I just I wouldn't let it go, basically.
Sure.
And a lot of people just said, it's just a sonic boom. But then there was all this speculation about UFOs and crashed UFOs, and I just thought, need to get to the bottom of this,
Yeah.
otherwise it's just going to spiral out of control. So I got hold of all this stuff, from the Ministry of Defence using Freedom of Information afterwards, years later. But again, it's all consistent with what I already knew. So SECAS, which is the UFO desk, when those questions were asked in Parliament by Helen Jackson, and I think this was just after the last Labour government, the Tony Blair government got in, and she was a Labour MP for Hillsborough, which is where I lived at the time. So they got the questions, they tasked Rudloe Manor to investigate it, because Rudloe Manor investigated reports of low-flying aircraft. And
Okay.
they're interested in terrorists, they're interested in drug smugglers, they're not specifically interested in UFOs, because that was another area that, like Nick Pope's desk dealt with. So if you can imagine, Secretariat Air Staff had different sections. One dealt with low-flying aircraft, one dealt with UFOs. So this is, the opposite desk to the Nick Pope's thing. So they tasked these RAF people in Wiltshire at Rudloe Manor to look into this, and they impounded the radar tapes basically, and basically they found records revealed there were no military fast jet aircraft booked into the night low flying area at the time, but it emerged that isn't true.
Wow.
Even though it's in this report. Then it goes on about the British Geological Survey picking up the sonic events, and it says they've removed his name, but it's Glenn Ford was the guy I spoke to, stated that although British Geological Survey can differentiate between sonic and seismic events, so they can say what is an aerial sonic boom and what is an earthquake.
Sure.
Sonic events cannot be identified as specifically caused by aircraft, so other things that can cause explosions in the sky, such include satellite, meteor re-entries, also been known to cause sonic events and may explain the happenings on the 24th of April. So then they looked at the radar tapes. So they provided a radar synopsis, which is not attached, even though they said it was.
Right.
So they looked at radar tapes. Clarke Spate, Great Dunfell. Great Dunfell, I think, is up in the Lake District.
So that's where the nearest radar would be that would have covered the area.
Recording reveals that at just before 10 o'clock, a squawk, and I think what they mean by squawk is it's a transponder on an aircraft that's in the air, squawking to the ground control, coming from Karlsruhe, Germany. So there was a civil airliner coming into Manchester from Germany at that time, descending towards the west, towards Manchester. So just before the booms were heard, it passes north of the plotted position, i.e. here, and lands at Manchester Airport just before 10 o'clock. So if that's correct, it can't have accounted for that.
No.
But it is around the time of that one. But a civil airliner won't create a sonic boom.
Absolutely not.
The Air Information Service officer of the opinion this aircraft is too slow moving to have caused a sonic boom. No other aircraft were seen to be flying in the area. It is therefore considered that no military link can be established to this reported event, and the case is now closed.
Interesting, because imagine if it was an illegal small light aircraft, that would still get picked up on radar.
Not necessarily.
Because of maybe no transponder switched on or something like that, or low lying, it's going under the radar.
Yeah. If you were flying something illegally, you want to evade radar, so what do? You fly low level.
Yeah.
Under the radar, because the radar's doing this.
Yeah.
Like, if you can imagine a radar beam, it's doing that, isn't it? So if you want to go under it, you fly low under it like that.
Or it was a UFO and they just can't pick them up on radar.
Well, what's a UFO?
Well, yeah.
So there's some more stuff here about, this is the internal. This is Sec AS1.
Right.
So Nick Poe would have been Sec AS2.
Yeah.
And his opposite number was Sec AS1. And Sec AS1 dealt with low-flying complaints.
Okay.
So whoever that was at the time, this is the tasking. So they've spoken to the RAF at Rudloe Manor about the incident. We'll be grateful if you can undertake as full an investigation as you can. The incident is something of a mystery. At the time, I understand that the witnesses thought a plane had crashed and both police and RAF at search and rescue undertook a search of the area. No crash site found, and evidence has subsequently emerged that the bang heard may have been a sonic event. So, yeah. The renewed interest in the event has been generated by journalists, i.e. me, and MPs keen to uncover the mystery.
So, I mean, you can see why people may have thought, if it's a UFO landing, a UFO crash, I can see that. But it is genuinely a mystery.
It is. But then I got this, which is the background briefing to the questions that were asked in Parliament by Helen Jackson. So I gave her those questions.
Wow, okay.
Which she gave to, I think it was George Robertson, Defence Minister, answered them in Parliament. And this, I think, shows that the investigation where it says no military fast jet aircraft is wrong.
Yeah, because we know there were 2 RAF tornadoes.
Well, it says here, this is Martin Fuller, who was the head of Nick Pope's boss, basically. Who was never been interviewed, as far as I'm aware.
Wow.
He says a number of military aircraft were booked to carry out flying training in Northern England on the 24th of March. So what's this?
So you've got contradictions.
Complete contradiction. And then he says the Ministry of Defence received 13 complaints about aircraft activity for that date from locations across the UK, but not from this region. They're from all other parts of the UK.
And that's interesting. No reported sightings of UFOs on the 24th or 25th of March were received by my department. Wow. And let's go conspiracy a little bit here. If Rudloe Manor RAF were looking into UFOs, they had that. They were looking at that.
Yeah.
SecAS didn't get those reports.
No, and you can look into all those files from 97 are now were released in the National Archives thing that I was involved in.
Yeah.
And so if you think he's lying, you can just go and they're all there, all those 13 reports.
Fantastic. This is just so... I think we should go to have a look at the area where it was seen heading towards the dams. So I think that's our next port of call. This is the area where the object, whatever you want to call it, was seen heading towards. So we'll get up onto the dam, take a look. So here we are on top of the dam. So the objects would have come from this direction across. And so this is kind of where the search and rescue area, there was a lot around this area. Obviously there are so many bodies of water. There's this one, and then further up it wiggles around, you get to Howden Dam, which is the next dam. And then down that way you get the reservoir that I've already showed. So it's such a huge, vast, remote area. Hence why it was such a big search and rescue operation. So we're now out on just one of the many areas of the moors, and as you can kind of see, it's just vast. I mean, the camera doesn't do it justice. It just goes on for miles in all directions. To have such a big search and rescue operation covering all of the kind of bodies of water that we looked at earlier, and then just miles and miles and miles of moorland. It's just vast. So could something have crashed and it just not have been found? It's hard to say. They did obviously have helicopters combing the areas. You'd think if there was an aircraft of any sort that it would have been seen, especially knowing the direction that it was seen in, the direction it was travelling in. It's a tough one. It's a mystery still, and this is why it's never been solved to this day. So we've just moved down the road a little bit. I wanted to get to a kind of a higher peak in the kind of moorland area. So that's what we're doing. but you can kind of just see the scale, the distance behind me. There's just so much space out here. It's so remote. Another thing that we do find out here a lot is if you look down here in this kind of valleys, there are small pockets of kind of forest and woodland, and these are scattered all throughout this huge area. So we're back, visited the locations, went through the information and the documents and everything. I have to say that is still somewhat the mystery. Occam's razor would say that potentially some light, small object or aircraft crashed, but then that doesn't account for the huge search and rescue operation. Surely they would find something. I mean, as you can see from the video, the moors are huge, but I suppose there is the possibility that something could get lost in there. Then we come to the other end of the story. Could it have been an unknown object? Well, part of me says yes, it could be, because we just don't know. Upon returning home as well, you know, I continued looking online at the story and seeing if there was any other bits of information out there. And sure enough, I came across a UFO researcher from the late 1990s who had some very bold claims that he had found some metal detectorists had been out and find some obscure metals that seemed to be from some exotic technology. But of course, there's no proof or evidence. I think all in all, this will just have to remain a mystery. It's great going out on location, looking at the documents and data that's available. But as with many of these kind of cases, it's 27 years. And so there's almost little to no chance of coming up with any new data or information that will take this investigation any further towards a conclusion. So I think on this one, I just have to remain open-minded as to the possibility of what it may have been. It's very easy for me as a UFO researcher, podcaster, investigator to jump straight to the anomalous aspect of this case, but I have to kind of rein myself in and look at both sides of the equation and realize that there is no answer. I can't let my beliefs slip into this and therefore come to a conclusion that benefits my belief system. I won't do that. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below. Subscribe if you don't already. Hit that like button. Don't roast me too much because, like I said at the very beginning, I am not an editor. This isn't my forte. I just wanted to put something different together that I enjoyed doing with my good friend Dr. Clarke, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it as well. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon. Goodbye for now.